There exists an ancient text that religious leaders have kept from you for over 1,000 years. A book so dangerous, so filled with forbidden knowledge, that entire councils of bishops declared it must never be read again. This is the story of the Book of Enoch, the banned scripture that survived, and the cosmic secrets it reveals about our world. But some truths refuse to die, and this truth will rewrite everything you thought you knew about humanity's past. Welcome to the Forbidden Chronicle of Enoch. The year was 1773. In a monastery perched on cliffs that scraped the heavens, Scottish explorer James Bruce made a discovery that would shake biblical scholarship's foundations. Bruce had come searching for the Blue Nile's source, but what he found was far more precious. There, wrapped in aged leather and written in ancient Ge'ez script, were 3 complete copies of a book the world thought lost forever, the Book of Enoch. For 16 centuries, this text had been condemned, suppressed, and systematically erased from Christian libraries. Church councils declared it heretical. Bishops ordered its destruction. Scribes stopped copying its pages, allowing time to devour what fire could not reach. But here, in this remote corner of the world, where ancient Christianity had taken root beyond Roman Church control, the forbidden book survived. The Ethiopian monks didn't see it as banned scripture. To them, it was holy text, as sacred as Genesis or Psalms. They had copied it by hand, generation after generation, preserving every word, every vision, every terrifying revelation about angels who fell from grace and giants who once walked the earth. When Bruce returned to Europe, few scholars could read it. The Ge'ez language was almost unknown in the West. The book sat ignored in European libraries for 50 years. But in 1821, Professor Richard Lawrence of Oxford produced the first complete English translation, and suddenly, after more than a millennium of silence, these ancient words began to speak again. What they revealed would change everything we thought we knew about the origins of evil, the nature of angels, and the hidden history of our world. But before we dive into this forbidden text's cosmic revelations, we must understand the man whose name it bears. Who was Enoch, and why was he chosen to receive such extraordinary visions? In Genesis chapter 5, Enoch appears like a whisper in ancient humanity's genealogies. He was the 7th generation from Adam, Noah's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather and father of Methuselah, who would live longer than any other human in biblical history. But what makes Enoch unique are the mysterious words describing his end. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Every other person in Genesis chapter 5 follows the same pattern. They lived, had children, and died, but not Enoch. Enoch walked with God. The Hebrew word halak suggests not casual association, but intimate fellowship, daily, ongoing relationship of the deepest kind. Enoch didn't just believe in God. He communed with the Creator in ways that transformed his very nature. And then, the most remarkable statement in biblical literature: he was not, for God took him. Enoch never died. At 365 years old, Enoch was translated, taken up, removed from this earthly realm, and brought into God's presence while still in physical form. This brief reference sparked centuries of wonder. If Enoch was taken to heaven alive, what did he see? What cosmic secrets were revealed? What knowledge did he gain that no other human possessed? The significance of being 7th from Adam wasn't lost on ancient readers. In biblical numerology, 7 represents completion, perfection, divine order. Enoch stood at a unique position, the perfect number in creation's lineage, chosen to bridge heaven and earth. When ancient writers needed a voice of absolute authority to speak about heaven's mysteries and evil's origins, they turned to Enoch, the man who walked with God, the man who never tasted death, the man who, alone among all humanity, had stood in the Almighty's throne room and lived to tell about it. This is why the Book of Enoch carries such weight. These are not ordinary men's speculations, but testimony from one who crossed the ultimate boundary, who saw the cosmic drama shaping our world, and returned with knowledge that would terrify kings and comfort the faithful. Now, let us enter that forbidden knowledge. In the beginning, according to Enoch's revelations, God created not just physical heavens and earth, but multiple realms of existence. 7 heavens stretched between the Almighty's throne and mortal flesh, each populated by different orders of angelic beings. At the highest levels dwelt seraphim and cherubim, creatures of pure flame and light, surrounding God's throne in eternal worship. Below them came the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, each commanding vast hosts and overseeing different aspects of divine administration. But in the lower heavens, closest to the earthly realm, God stationed a special class of angels called the Watchers. The Hebrew word is iron, meaning those who are awake, those who watch. These were not ordinary angels, but beings specifically chosen for a unique mission to observe, to guard, to maintain the delicate balance between spiritual and physical worlds. 200 of these mighty beings were assigned to watch over the early earth. Their captain was Samjaza, whose name means the one who sees God. Under his command served angels whose names would become synonymous with rebellion: Azazel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, and 195 others. Their post was Mount Hermon, a towering peak rising over 9,000 feet on what is now the border between Israel, Lebanon, and Syria in ancient times. This mountain was considered a threshold where heaven and earth came closest together, where physical and spiritual realms nearly touched. From this elevated position, the Watchers observed all human activity. They watched Adam and Eve's descendants spread across the earth, building cities, developing agriculture, creating civilization's foundations. They witnessed births, family growth, the emergence of tribes and nations. Their role was crucial, but limited. They were to watch, observe, report to heaven on humanity's progress. They were guardians of cosmic order, ensuring God's established boundaries remained intact. The Watchers possessed knowledge humans were never meant to have. They understood metallurgy's secrets, astronomy's mysteries, plants and stones' hidden properties. They knew God's names, powerful magic formulas, warfare techniques that could devastate entire populations. This knowledge was meant to remain in heaven. It was part of the divine plan that humanity would develop slowly, naturally, learning what they needed when ready to handle such power responsibly. The Watchers were guardians of this cosmic quarantine, enforcers of heaven's timeline for human development. But as they watched from their mountain throne, something began stirring within these celestial beings that had never been intended by their creator: desire. The Book of Enoch tells us that in Jared's days, Enoch's father, something unprecedented occurred in cosmic order. The Watchers, beings of pure spirit who had observed humanity with divine detachment for generations, began feeling something angels were never meant to experience. They saw the daughters of men and found them beautiful. Think about this moment's magnitude. These were not human men overwhelmed by physical attraction. These were cosmic beings, creatures who had stood in God's presence, witnessed star and galaxy creation, made pays, heard the sphere's music, and seen beauty beyond human comprehension. Yet somehow, human women's sight stirred something in their celestial nature that threatened reality's very foundations. The text is specific about what attracted them. It wasn't merely physical beauty, though that played a role. It was something deeper, more complex. These angels saw in human women a beauty different from anything in heavenly realms. Where angels were pure spirit, humans were unique fusions of spirit and flesh, divine breath and earthly clay. In the daughters of men, the Watchers saw a mystery they longed to understand, a form of existence they suddenly envied. But Samjaza, their leader, understood the consequences of what his heart desired. He knew that celestial beings uniting with human women would shatter every creation law. It would cross boundaries God himself had established, bringing contamination to both realms, corruption to the heavenly, and catastrophe to the earthly. Yet the desire would not be denied. So Samjaza proposed something never before conceived in the cosmos: a conspiracy among angels. "Come," he said to his fellow Watchers, "let us choose wives from among the children of men and beget children for ourselves." But even speaking these words, Samjaza felt their weight. He knew such an act would bring heaven's wrath upon them all. Once they crossed this line, there would be no return to their former state, no forgiveness from God's throne. His fear was evident in what he said next: "I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." The other Watchers understood the gravity of what was being proposed. This wasn't merely rebellion, it was cosmic treason. They would abandon their posts, violate their nature, unleash consequences rippling through all creation. But they also understood that if they were crossing this ultimate boundary, they needed to cross it together. And so, on Mount Hermon's peak, under stars that had witnessed galaxies' birth, 200 angels made a choice that would damn them forever. "Let us all swear an oath," Samjaza declared, "and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing." The oath they swore was unlike anything ever spoken. They bound themselves with curses, calling destruction upon any who would abandon their dark purpose. They invoked powers and principalities, cosmic forces, ensuring mutual destruction if any tried turning back. The die was cast. The boundary was about to be crossed. And with that oath, spoken in Mount Hermon's thin air while heavens looked on in horror, the age of innocence came to an end. What happened next would forever change human civilization's trajectory. The 200 Watchers descended from Mount Hermon, took physical form, and began choosing wives from among the daughters of men. But their transgression went far beyond forbidden unions. As these celestial beings integrated into human society, they began sharing knowledge heaven had specifically withheld from humanity. Azazel, whose name means God strengthens, became the primary teacher of forbidden arts. He showed men how to make swords, knives, shields, and coats of mail. He taught warfare's metallurgy, how to extract metals from earth and forge them into death instruments. Before Azazel's teachings, human conflicts were limited in scope and lethality. Men fought with stones and wooden clubs, conflicts rarely escalating beyond personal disputes. But with metal weapons' introduction, humanity learned warfare on previously unimaginable scales. Azazel didn't stop with weapons. He taught women cosmetics, how to paint eyes with antimony, use precious stones and jewelry to enhance beauty. This might seem harmless compared to war weapons, but Enoch reveals it as deeper corruption, introducing vanity, pride, and human beauty's objectification. Samjaza, the rebellion's leader, specialized in different forbidden knowledge. He taught humans enchantments and root cutting, foundations of what would become magic and sorcery. He showed them how to manipulate spiritual forces, to call upon powers beyond the physical realm, bend reality to their will through occult practices. Other Watchers contributed their own specialties to this catastrophic education. Armors taught enchantment resolving, counter magic, creating eternal arms races between competing sorcerers. Barakijal taught astrology, showing humans how to read zodiac signs and predict futures through star movements. Kokabel revealed constellation science. Ezekiel taught cloud knowledge. Arakiel showed earth signs. Shamsiel revealed sun signs. And Sariel taught moon's course. Each knowledge piece might have seemed beneficial in isolation. What harm in understanding astronomy, learning weather patterns, knowing plants and stones' properties? But Enoch reveals the terrible truth. This was knowledge humanity wasn't ready to handle. It was divine wisdom given without divine maturity. Cosmic power granted without cosmic responsibility. The weapons Azazel taught were used not for protection but conquest. The astrology Barakijal revealed became foundation for divination and false worship. The magic Samjaza demonstrated turned hearts from trusting God toward relying on occult manipulation. Most devastating. These teachings created inequality among humans that had never existed before. Those learning the Watcher's secrets gained enormous advantages over those remaining ignorant. Knowledge became power, and power became oppression. Seth's descendants, who had maintained faith in God, suddenly faced Cain's descendants, possessing supernatural weapons and abilities. The balance maintaining relative peace in the early world was shattered, but the Watcher's greatest transgression was yet to come. Their unions with human women were producing offspring, and these children were unlike anything the world had ever seen. They were the Nephilim, and their hunger would consume the earth. The knowledge unleashed by the Watchers spread like wildfire through human civilization. But unlike beneficial discoveries that elevate society, these teachings brought corruption that poisoned everything they touched. The metallurgy that should have improved agriculture instead created weapons of unprecedented destruction. Tribes that had coexisted peacefully for generations suddenly possessed the means to wage wars of conquest. The bronze and iron forged in Azazel's workshops became instruments of oppression and genocide. Human society stratified in ways never before seen. Those with access to Watcher knowledge became ruling classes, using their supernatural advantages to dominate those who remained ignorant. The egalitarian simplicity of early human communities gave way to hierarchies based on power and secret knowledge. The magical arts taught by Samjaza created a new kind of spiritual pollution. Instead of seeking God through prayer and righteousness, humans began attempting to manipulate divine forces through spells and enchantments. They sought to control their circumstances through occult practices rather than trusting in divine providence. Women adorned with cosmetics and jewelry taught by Azazel became objects of desire rather than partners in sacred covenant. The arts of beautification, intended to enhance natural loveliness, became tools of seduction and manipulation. Vanity replaced humility. Pride displaced contentment. The astronomical knowledge that should have helped humans worship the Creator by understanding His cosmic order instead became the foundation for astrology and star worship. People began consulting celestial movements for guidance rather than seeking divine will through relationship with God. Perhaps most tragically, the corruption wasn't limited to those who directly received Watcher instruction. The forbidden knowledge spread through normal human channels. Taught by corrupted teachers to unsuspecting students, passed down through family lines, embedded in cultural practices. Children grew up in a world where violence was normal, where magic was commonplace, where beauty was commodified, where divine authority was challenged by competing claims of cosmic power. What had been aberrations in their parents' generation became standard practice in theirs. The natural world itself began reflecting this corruption. Animals learned aggressive behaviors from observing human violence. Plants and minerals were harvested not for sustenance, but for magical purposes. The harmony between humanity and creation, established at the beginning, was systematically destroyed. Even more disturbing, some humans began to prefer the Watcher's teachings to divine revelation. The knowledge offered by fallen angels seemed more immediately practical than God's commands. The power promised through occult practices appeared more tangible than blessings obtained through righteousness. This spiritual adultery grieved the heart of God and horrified loyal angels who watched the systematic corruption of divine creation. The boundaries between sacred and profane, between divine and demonic, between natural and supernatural, were being obliterated. The stage was set for the next phase of this cosmic catastrophe. The unions between Watchers and human women were producing offspring, and these beings would make the corruption already unleashed seem mild by comparison. For the Nephilim were coming, and with them would come an appetite that would threaten to devour all life on earth. The unions between the Watchers and daughters of men produced offspring, but these were not ordinary children. They were the Nephilim, a Hebrew word meaning the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. The Book of Enoch describes these beings in terms that challenge human comprehension. They were giants of enormous stature, growing to heights of 300 cubits. To put this in perspective, that would make them nearly 450 feet tall, towering above the landscape like living mountains. Even if we consider this ancient hyperbole, even if we scale down these measurements, we're still talking about beings of incredible size and strength. Imagine creatures 15, 20, 30 feet tall, with angelic intelligence and bestial appetites. But size wasn't their only distinguishing characteristic. These Nephilim possessed supernatural abilities inherited from their angelic fathers. They had strength that could shatter stone, speed that could outrun any earthly creature, and knowledge of forbidden arts their fathers had taught humanity. Their very appearance was terrifying. The text suggests they were beautiful in a terrible way, possessing otherworldly attractiveness from their mixed nature. They had angelic beings' physical perfection combined with human flesh's raw vitality, creating creatures both magnificent and monstrous. Yet for all their power and beauty, the Nephilim were fundamentally flawed beings. They were hybrids, creatures that should never have existed, born from unions, violating creation's very order. They were neither fully human nor fully angelic, but something monstrous belonging to neither realm. These were not noble giants of folklore, not gentle giants of children's stories. The Nephilim were predators, creatures driven by insatiable hungers, growing more terrible each day. Their intelligence was vast, inherited from angelic fathers, but coupled with human emotions and desires, amplified beyond natural bounds. They possessed heaven's knowledge, but none of its restraint. They had angelic power, but none of their submission to divine will. As they matured, the Nephilim began understanding their unique position in creation. They were superior to humans in every measurable way, yet outcasts from heaven. This realization bred terrible resentment, hatred for both human mothers who had given them flesh and angelic fathers who had abandoned them to earthly existence. Their very existence was an abomination, corruption of both human and angelic nature that would soon threaten every living thing's survival on earth. As the Nephilim grew to maturity, their appetites became impossible to satisfy through normal means. The Book of Enoch describes their consumption in horrifying detail. They began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Think about what this means. These creatures consumed everything in their path. They ate entire herds of cattle, flocks of sheep, every wild animal they could catch. Forests were stripped bare as they consumed every living plant. Rivers ran dry as they drained water sources to satisfy endless thirst. Their hunger wasn't merely physical. It was spiritual, psychological, cosmic. They were trying to fill a void that could never be filled, attempting to satisfy a nature fundamentally divided against itself. They ate not just for sustenance, but from desperate attempts to resolve their existence's contradiction. The natural world, which had maintained balance since creation, began collapsing under this unprecedented predation. Species that had existed for generations were hunted to extinction in mere years. Ecosystems that had flourished for centuries were devastated in seasons. But even this mass consumption wasn't enough. When they had devoured all food that humans and animals needed to survive, the Nephilim began turning on humanity itself, and they began to sin against men and to devour them. The text tells us, cannibalism became commonplace as these giants viewed humans not as their mother's people but as another food source to exploit. The horror of this cannot be overstated. These were beings who shared human blood, who had been nursed by human mothers, who had grown up in human communities. Yet they turned on their own families with ruthlessness, defying comprehension. Some Nephilim even turned on each other. The text describes how they devoured one another's flesh, suggesting that when all other food sources were exhausted, these giants began cannibalistic wars among themselves. The earth itself began crying out against this corruption. The natural order, which had maintained balance since creation, was being systematically destroyed by creatures whose very existence violated divine law. Blood soaked into the ground in quantities never before seen. The soil became polluted with violence. The air itself seemed to thicken with death and decay's stench. But the Nephilim's impact went beyond mere consumption. Their presence corrupted everything around them. Animals learned violence from watching these giants. Plants withered in their presence. Creation's very fabric seemed to recoil from beings who should never have existed. Even more disturbing, some humans began emulating the Nephilim's behavior. Violence escalated beyond anything previously known. Warfare became more brutal. The arts taught by Watchers were used for increasingly destructive purposes. The world was sliding toward chaos. And at this catastrophe's center were beings who embodied the ultimate violation of cosmic order. The Nephilim story might seem like ancient fantasy, until we consider that virtually every Earth culture has preserved similar accounts of giants who once terrorized humanity. In Mesopotamia, the oldest written civilization, we find stories of Anunnaki and Igigi, beings described as fallen gods who came from heaven and interfered with human development. The Mesopotamian king list speaks of rulers who reigned impossibly long periods, some described as giants possessing supernatural powers. The Epic of Gilgamesh, perhaps humanity's oldest written story, tells of Enkidu, a giant created by gods who possessed superhuman strength. Gilgamesh himself is described as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, a hybrid being of enormous power. Greek mythology speaks of titans, massive beings who warred against gods and were eventually imprisoned in Tartarus, an underworld prison remarkably similar to where Enoch says fallen watchers were bound. Greeks told of gigantes, born from Uranus's blood when castrated by Kronos, giants who attempted storming heaven itself and were defeated by gods in cosmic battle. These weren't merely stories about big people. They were accounts of beings who challenged cosmic order, possessed powers threatening both gods and mortals, who had to be defeated through divine intervention. Norse mythology preserves tales of Jotnar, frost giants, who were enemies of both gods and men, beings of enormous size and terrible appetite, who threatened to bring Ragnarok, the world's end. Norse sagas describe these giants as possessing magical abilities, supernatural strength, and insatiable hunger for destruction. In the Americas, Native American tribes from Alaska to Chile have legends of cannibalistic giants. Lakota speak of Wazia, winter giants who brought cold and famine. Paiutes tell of red-haired giants who lived in caves and hunted humans for food. Choctaw remember Nahalo, pale giants who were their people's enemies. These aren't isolated stories. They represent consistent memory patterns preserved across cultures having no contact for thousands of years. Asian cultures preserve similar stories. Hindu texts describe Dayas and Danavas, giant demons who warred against gods and possessed supernatural powers. The Ramayana tells of Ravana and his demon army, beings of enormous size who threatened cosmic order's overthrow. Japanese folklore tells of Oni, massive creatures with supernatural strength and taste for human flesh. Chinese mythology speaks of Pangu, primordial giants who shaped the world, and various demon races that threatened humanity in ancient times. Why do these stories persist across cultures separated by oceans and millennia? Why do independently developed civilizations all remember giant beings who threatened humanity's survival? The conventional explanation is that these are all mythological, symbolic stories created to explain natural phenomena or express psychological truths about human condition. But what if they're not myths at all? What if they're memories, cultural recollections of actual historical events preserved in humanity's collective consciousness? What if the Book of Enoch is not fantasy, but the only surviving detailed account of a global catastrophe that every human culture dimly remembers? This possibility becomes more intriguing when we examine certain archaeological anomalies that mainstream science struggles to explain adequately. Around the world, we find megalithic structures that seem requiring engineering capabilities far beyond what we attribute to ancient civilizations. The stones at Baalbek in Lebanon, some weighing over 800 tons, were quarried from miles away, transported across difficult terrain, and precisely positioned with skill challenging our understanding of ancient technology. The trilithon stones at Baalbek are among the largest worked stones ever discovered. Each weighs approximately 800 tons, yet they were lifted and placed with precision that would challenge even modern cranes. How did ancient people accomplish this feat? Sacsayhuama Inn's precision-cut stones in Peru fit together so perfectly you cannot slide a knife blade between them, yet some blocks weigh over 100 tons. The stones were cut from quarries miles away, shaped with incredible precision, and transported to a site over 11,000 feet above sea level. Pumapunku in Bolivia features stone blocks with perfectly straight edges, smooth surfaces, and complex angles that would challenge creation even with modern power tools. The cut's precision, interlocking joints' complexity, individual stones' weight, all suggest capabilities exceeding what we attribute to pre-Columbian civilizations. Could these megalithic sites be remnants of Nephilim civilization? Could beings of enormous size and supernatural strength have been responsible for moving and positioning stones that seem impossible for normal humans to handle? The geographic distribution of these sites is also intriguing. Megalithic structures appear on every continent, often in locations extremely difficult for normal humans to access or build upon. Yet construction techniques show remarkable similarities, as if built by beings sharing common knowledge and capabilities. Then there are skeletal remains. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, reports surfaced regularly of giant human skeletons being discovered in burial mounds, caves, and ancient sites, only to mysteriously disappear from public view. In 1891, scientists reportedly found remains of humans over 7 feet tall in Ohio burial mounds. The Smithsonian Institution was said to have taken possession of these remains, but they have never been displayed or studied publicly. In 1902, archaeologists claimed discovering skeletons over 8 feet tall in Pennsylvania. Similar reports come from Wisconsin, Minnesota, California, Nevada, and dozens of other locations across North America. Most discoveries were reported in local newspapers of the time, complete with measurements, photographs, and witness testimony. But physical evidence has consistently vanished. The skeletons were supposedly taken by official institutions, never to be seen again. Is this evidence of systematic cover-up? Are there forces at work to suppress evidence that might validate historical accuracy of accounts like the Book of Enoch? Or is there a more mundane explanation that these were hoaxes, misidentifications, or normal human remains that seemed larger due to poor measurement techniques and sensationalist reporting? The questions remain unanswered, but they suggest that the Nephilim story may be more than ancient mythology. They point to the possibility that our understanding of human history and the forces that have shaped it may be far more complex and mysterious than we have been taught to believe. The corruption unleashed by the Watchers and their Nephilim offspring did not go unnoticed in heaven's courts, as violence escalated on earth, as innocent blood cried out from the ground, as creation's very fabric groaned under this cosmic violation's weight. The archangels took action. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, heaven's 4 great princes, observed the catastrophe unfolding below with growing alarm. These were not distant observers of human affairs, but beings intimately involved in divine justice administration, angels whose very nature compelled them to act when cosmic order was threatened. The situation had reached crisis point. Earth was being systematically destroyed by creatures who should never have existed. The knowledge given by fallen Watchers was being used to create weapons of unprecedented destruction, the natural balance maintaining life since creation was collapsing under Nephilim predation's weight. But more than environmental devastation was at stake. The very concept of divine authority was being challenged. The Watchers had defied God's explicit boundaries, corrupted both human and angelic nature, and produced offspring who viewed themselves as superior to all other created beings. If this rebellion went unanswered, if these cosmic law violations were allowed to continue, reality's entire structure could collapse. Other angels might follow the Watchers' example. Humans might abandon God worship in favor of serving these hybrid giants. The distinction between heaven and earth, between creator and creation, could be lost forever. The four archangels convened in the Most High's presence, bringing with them a comprehensive report of the crisis unfolding on earth. "See what Azazel has done," they declared. "How he has taught all manner of iniquity upon the earth, and has revealed the eternal secrets which were made in heaven." Their indictment was thorough and damning. They described how Samjaza had led 200 watchers in systematic rebellion against divine authority. They detailed the forbidden knowledge revealed to humanity, knowledge accelerating human development in dangerous directions. They documented the Nephilim's rise and the devastation these giants were causing to both human civilization and the natural world. They presented evidence of cannibalism, environmental destruction, and divine knowledge corruption for war and oppression purposes. But most importantly, they brought with them the cries of those suffering under this new reign of terror, the voices of innocent humans devoured by giants, the pleas of righteous men and women who watched their world descend into chaos, the very earth itself groaning under corruption and violence. These were not abstract philosophical concerns, but urgent practical crises demanding immediate divine intervention. God's response was swift and decisive. The cosmic order had been violated in ways threatening all creation's continuation, the boundaries he had established between heaven and earth, between angelic and human nature, between divine knowledge and mortal understanding, had been systematically shattered. Justice demanded action, but this would not be arbitrary divine wrath. This would be precise, targeted intervention designed to restore balance while preserving those remaining innocent of corruption. Each archangel received a specific mission tailored to their unique abilities and responsibilities. Michael, the great warrior prince, was tasked with binding the rebel angels who had initiated this cosmic catastrophe. Gabriel, the divine will messenger, was sent to warn Noah and orchestrate righteous humanity's preservation. Raphael, the healer, was commanded to bind Azazel, the primary forbidden knowledge source, in eternal imprisonment. Uriel, whose name means fire of God, was charged with warning humanity of coming judgment and purification. The divine war council had concluded. Heaven's justice was about to be unleashed upon earth, not in blind fury, but with surgical precision designed to cut out the cancer while preserving healthy tissue. Raphael's mission was perhaps the most terrible and complex of all. He was commanded to bind Azazel, the watcher who had taught humanity war and vanity arts, and cast him into darkness until final judgment day. Azazel was not merely another fallen angel. He was the primary corrupter, the being most responsible for introducing forbidden knowledge to humanity. His teachings had transformed human civilization from pastoral existence into a world of warfare, violence, and materialism. Azazel's binding was described in vivid and terrifying detail. He was taken to a place called Dudael, a wasteland of jagged rocks and burning sand where the very landscape seemed to reflect the corruption he had brought to creation. There, Raphael bound him hand and foot with chains that could never be broken, forged from materials existing beyond the physical realm. These were not mere metal restraints, but cosmic bonds holding spiritual beings in complete captivity. Azazel was cast into a pit prepared specifically for his imprisonment. Sharp stones were placed over him, not merely to cause pain, but to ensure he could never escape his underground prison. Darkness covered his face, so he might never again see light, cutting him off from any connection to the divine realm he had abandoned. This was not merely punishment, but cosmic quarantine. Azazel's corruption was so profound, his influence so destructive, that he had to be completely isolated from all creation. The knowledge he had shared with humanity could not be taken back, but its source could be contained and prevented from causing further damage. The text tells us Azazel would remain in this prison until the great judgment day, when he would be cast into fire for eternal destruction. But even more significant, it reveals that all violence and bloodshed resulting from his teachings would be charged to his account. To him, ascribe all sin, the divine command declared, acknowledging that while humans bore responsibility for individual choices, ultimate accountability for human civilization's corruption lay with the angel who had first taught forbidden arts. Michael's task was even more comprehensive. He was commanded to bind Samjaza and all watchers who had followed him in rebellion. These fallen angels, 200 mighty beings who had once stood in God's presence, were now to be cast into prisons from which they could never escape. The binding was carried out with military precision. Michael, commanding vast hosts of loyal angels, descended upon the rebel watchers and overwhelmed them with divine power. These beings who had seemed so mighty when corrupting humans were revealed as helpless before heaven's justice. They were taken to Earth's valleys, deep places where realm boundaries grew thin and bound with chains, existing beyond physical reality. These were not earthly metals that might rust or break, but spiritual restraints holding beings of pure spirit in absolute captivity. The fallen watchers were cast into fire pits, underground prisons, where they would remain in torment until final judgment. The text tells us they would be imprisoned for 70 generations, a period spanning the entirety of human history until final resurrection and judgment of all souls. But their binding created a new and unprecedented problem. The Nephilim, the giant offspring of these unions, were left orphaned on Earth. Their angelic fathers were now imprisoned, unable to guide or control them. Their human mothers were powerless against beings of such supernatural strength and appetite. Without any restraining influence, the giants became even more destructive than before. They rampaged across Earth without consideration for consequences, consuming everything in their path, turning on each other and on humanity with increasing violence. The Watchers' imprisonment had solved one problem but intensified another. Something more drastic was required to deal with the hybrid monsters that continued terrorizing the Earth. Gabriel's mission was the most far-reaching and consequential of all. He was sent to Noah, the one righteous man of his generation, with instructions that would preserve life while cleansing Earth of corruption. Noah was not chosen arbitrarily. He was described as perfect in his generations, a phrase suggesting not moral perfection, but genetic purity. In a world where humanity's bloodlines had been corrupted through intermarriage with the Watchers' descendants, Noah's family remained untainted by forbidden unions. Gabriel's message to Noah was both terrifying and hopeful. Earth would be cleansed of its corruption, but righteous humanity would be preserved through divine intervention. The plan was both simple and terrible in scope. Water, the element of life and purification, would cover the entire Earth. Every living thing that breathed air would perish, except those preserved in the ark Noah would build according to precise divine specifications. This was not arbitrary destruction. This was surgical removal of cosmic cancer threatening to destroy all creation. The Nephilim, who had corrupted Earth with their violence and appetite, would be drowned in floods. The humans who had embraced the Watchers' forbidden knowledge, who had turned from God to follow fallen angels' teachings, would perish in waters. The animals corrupted by exposure to giants, that had learned violence and cannibalism from observing Nephilim behavior, would also be destroyed. Only breeding pairs of clean animals, those not tainted by the hybrid monster's presence, would be preserved. Yet the innocent would survive, Noah and his family, animals not corrupted by giants' presence, plant seeds that would replenish Earth. All would survive in the ark, serving as floating sanctuary during cosmic cleansing. The ark's dimensions were specified with mathematical precision: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. These measurements were not arbitrary, but calculated to provide exactly the space needed to preserve representatives of all uncorrupted life on Earth. For 40 days and nights, water fell from heaven and erupted from Earth's depths. This was not merely heavy rain, but complete disruption of hydrological systems maintaining Earth's life. The fountains of the great deep were broken up, releasing subterranean waters held in check since creation. The windows of heaven were opened, allowing celestial waters to pour down in quantities, defying natural explanation. Water covered even the highest mountains. Every air-breathing creature not in the ark perished. Earth that had been corrupted by hybrid giants' presence was literally washed clean, baptized in water that removed every trace of the abominations threatening creation. The Nephilim, for all their supernatural strength and size, could not survive their world's drowning. These beings who had seemed invincible, who had terrorized humanity and devoured Earth's resources, were swept away by cleansing waters like any other mortal creatures. The flood was not genocide, but cosmic chemotherapy. The diseased cells had to be removed so healthy life could continue. The corruption threatening to spread throughout all creation was contained and eliminated, allowing for fresh start in human history. But even this drastic intervention would not completely solve the problem created by the Watchers' rebellion, for while the physical bodies of the Nephilim were destroyed, their spirits would prove to be another challenge entirely. The Nephilim's death in the Great Flood solved one problem, but created another that would plague humanity throughout the rest of history. These hybrid beings, born from angels and humans' union, were not like normal humans who die and await resurrection. They were not like angels who are immortal spirits. They were something else entirely, and their deaths produced something unprecedented in creation. According to the Book of Enoch, when the Nephilim died in the flood, their spirits did not go to Sheol, the place of the dead, where human souls await judgment. Instead, they became something new and terrible, evil spirits that roamed Earth, seeking to possess and corrupt the living. This revelation transforms our understanding of demons' nature. They are not fallen angels, as many assume, but the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, still driven by the same insatiable hungers that had characterized their physical existence. The logic of this is profound. The Nephilim were hybrid beings, part angel and part human. When they died, their human nature experienced death, but their angelic nature, being immortal, could not be destroyed. What remained was corrupted spiritual essence, possessing supernatural knowledge and power, but lacking physical form needed to interact directly with the material world. These demonic spirits retained all forbidden knowledge inherited from their angelic fathers. They understood magic secrets, herbs, and stones' properties, celestial bodies' movements, powers' hidden names. But without physical bodies, they could only influence the world through possession, deception, and manipulation of living beings. This explains many mysteries in later biblical and theological literature. It explains why demons in the New Testament are described as seeking embodiment, why they beg Jesus not to send them into the abyss, why they prefer inhabiting humans or even swine rather than remaining disembodied. The demons are not merely evil, they are desperate. They are spirits designed to inhabit physical form who have been trapped in disembodied state. Their attempts to possess humans are not just malicious. They are driven by fundamental need to experience physical existence once again. But their possession brings with it all their original nature's corruption. When demons inhabit humans, they bring the insatiable hungers, violence, pride, and rebellion against divine authority that characterize their existence as Nephilim. These spirits became the source of false religions throughout human history. They were the power behind idolatry, the supernatural force, giving apparent validity to pagan worship. When humans worshipped false gods, they were actually interacting with these demonic entities who possessed just enough supernatural knowledge to perform impressive miracles and predict future events. The mystery religions of the ancient world, occult practices, promising hidden knowledge and supernatural power, magical arts claiming to manipulate spiritual forces, all drew their power from the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, who were eager to share forbidden knowledge with any humans willing to serve them. This revelation also explains ongoing spiritual warfare's nature. The conflict between good and evil is not merely philosophical or metaphorical. It is continuation of the cosmic rebellion that began when the Watchers first descended from Mount Hermon. Every act of demonic possession, every false miracle performed by occult practitioners, every spiritual deception leading people away from truth, can be traced back to this original corruption. The demons are not abstract forces of evil, but specific entities with particular history and personal hatred for both God and humanity. Their hatred for humans is especially intense because humans represent everything the demons have lost. Humans possess physical bodies, can experience the material world directly, can reproduce and create new life, can worship God in ways disembodied spirits cannot. Yet their hatred is mixed with desperate need. They require human cooperation to accomplish their goals in the physical realm. They must convince, deceive, or force humans to act on their behalf. This creates complex dynamics of manipulation and dependency, characterizing all demonic activity. The flood cleansed earth of physical corruption. But the spiritual battle would continue until final judgment, when all evil, both angelic and demonic, would be eternally defeated. And so the stage was set for the ongoing drama of human history. A drama in which Noah's descendants would face not only temptations of their own fallen nature, but active opposition of supernatural entities whose very existence reminded of what happens when cosmic boundaries are violated. The Watchers were bound. The Nephilim were destroyed. But their legacy would haunt humanity until the end of time. After witnessing the cosmic catastrophe unleashed by the Watchers, Enoch received a summons that would forever change his understanding of reality. Beings of radiance and power appeared before him, their presence so overwhelming that mortal flesh could barely endure it. These were loyal servants of the Most High, angels who had maintained their positions throughout the rebellion. "Enoch, scribe of righteousness," they declared, "the Lord of spirits has commanded that you come before him to witness what no mortal eye has seen, to record what no human mind has conceived." The selection of Enoch was not arbitrary. Among all descendants of Adam, Enoch alone had maintained perfect fellowship with God, while others embraced forbidden knowledge. While civilization descended into violence, Enoch remained pure. But why choose a human rather than another angel? Humans occupy a unique position in creation, lower than angels in power, yet higher in potential destiny. They are created in God's image, in ways angels are not, possessing capacities for growth that purely spiritual beings lack. Enoch would serve as humanity's representative in the cosmic courtroom, the mortal witness who could bridge earthly and heavenly reality. His testimony would carry weight because he shared human nature, had experienced limitations that characterize mortal existence. The angels explained his body would undergo transformation, made capable of surviving in realms where mortal flesh could not exist. His mind would be expanded, his spirit elevated, brought into direct contact with divine glory. "Fear not, Enoch," they assured him. "You have been chosen to see his glory, to understand his ways, to carry his message to generations yet unborn." Enoch was lifted from earth and carried through successive levels of cosmic reality, each more magnificent than the last. 7 distinct realms stretched between earth and God's throne, each with its own purpose and inhabitants. The first heaven was the atmospheric realm, where angels controlled wind and rain, snow and hail, lightning and thunder, with perfect precision. The second heaven was darker, where fallen angels awaited judgment. These imprisoned beings existed in conscious suspension, aware of their fate, but powerless to change it. The third heaven contained the original Garden of Eden, not as it existed on earth, but as its heavenly prototype. Here grew the tree of life, its fruit possessing power to grant true immortality. The fourth heaven housed vast libraries, cosmic repositories, where every event in creation's history was recorded. Angels served as scribes, maintaining records of every thought, word, and deed throughout time. The fifth heaven contained angelic armies, vast hosts of warrior spirits organized with military precision. These were forces that would deploy in the final cosmic battle, beings whose power could reshape reality itself. The sixth heaven challenged even Enoch's transformed understanding. Here dwelt seraphim and cherubim, beings of such concentrated glory that their presence bent reality around them. Seraphim sang praises, generating energies that sustained cosmic order itself. Cherubim possessed comprehensive knowledge encompassing all creation. Yet even these magnificent beings prostrated themselves before the throne occupying the seventh heaven, acknowledging their created status before the source of all existence. During his ascent, Enoch received instruction in cosmic systems governing time, seasons, and celestial movements. This was revelation of divine mathematics structuring reality according to perfect principles. Uriel, fire of God, served as his instructor. His face shone like the sun, garments woven from starlight itself. "Observe, Enoch," Uriel commanded, "how heaven's luminaries maintain courses according to the Most High's unchangeable will. Nothing moves by chance, but all follows perfect order, established from the world's foundation." Enoch learned the solar year consisted of exactly 364 days, divided into 4 seasons of precisely 91 days each. This cosmic calendar was mathematically perfect, designed to maintain eternal harmony between heavenly and earthly realms. The sun traveled through 12 gates, 6 eastern for rising, 6 western for setting. Each month the sun emerged from different gates, creating seasonal variations. These were actual cosmic structures, dimensional openings, channeling solar energy by divine decree. But this wasn't the imperfect calendar later civilizations would adopt. The lunar calendar, with irregular months requiring constant adjustment. Was corruption introduced after humanity's fall? When mortals observe corrupted calendars, Uriel warned, they worship at wrong times, disrupting harmony between earth and sky, essential for spiritual blessing. The stars, Enoch discovered, were not decorative lights, but actual spiritual beings. Angels assigned specific positions in heavenly hierarchy. Each star had a God-known name, specific function in creation's administration. Constellations told cosmic history's story, divine illustrations of spiritual truths, prophecies written in light across space's darkness. Enoch's education culminated with introduction to the Heavenly Library, a repository containing records of everything that had happened or would happen throughout creation. This wasn't an earthly library, but a living collection of information existing beyond normal comprehension. The books were spiritual realities, divine knowledge patterns, accessible only by beings with sufficient cosmic authority. "Here are recorded every created being's deeds," his guide explained. "Nothing is forgotten. Nothing escapes the Most High's perfect notice." Enoch witnessed books, recording every word spoken, thought conceived, action performed throughout creation's history. The scope encompassed all human activity. Angelic deeds, celestial movements, every creature's existence. The library also contained prophecy books and divine plans unfolding in future ages. One section covered the Watcher's rebellion and its consequences. Another contained names and destinies of all humans who would ever live, some inscribed in light, others written in shadow. Most significantly, Enoch discovered his transformation into a celestial librarian. His earthly calling as faithful recorder was being elevated to cosmic significance. He would become heaven's chronicler, responsible for maintaining divine justice records throughout eternity. "You proved faithful recording God's words on earth," his guide declared. "Now you shall record his words for eternity." This brought unprecedented honor and overwhelming responsibility. Enoch would possess knowledge few beings could access, but bear cosmic accountability's weight. Enoch's transformation was complete. The man who walked with God on earth would now walk with God in heaven, serving as humanity's eternal representative while maintaining divine records governing all things ultimate resolution. From his elevated position in the heavenly realm, Enoch received 3 profound parables, cosmic visions revealing creation's ultimate destiny and the final resolution between good and evil. The first parable revealed the dwelling places of the righteous, eternal rewards awaiting those who remained faithful despite earthly corruption. Enoch saw mountain ranges of crystal and precious stones, regions of indescribable beauty, where streams of living water flowed through gardens of perpetual spring. "Here shall dwell the spirits of the righteous," his guide explained. "Those who endured suffering for divine truth, who refused compromise with the fallen watcher's corruption." The inhabitants were beings of light, bodies transformed into incorruptible forms, experiencing eternal joy without mortal limitations. They possessed knowledge without confusion, love without jealousy, peace without conflict. These rewards weren't distributed equally. Those who suffered more for righteousness received greater glory. Divine justice ensured every sacrifice was acknowledged, every faithful act rewarded according to its merit. The second parable introduced the Son of Man, a being possessing both human and divine nature who would serve as creation's ultimate judge. "In those days, the Son of Man shall appear," the vision revealed, "chosen before creation, yet revealed in the last times to execute judgment upon all who have corrupted the earth." This cosmic judge possessed wisdom encompassing all creation, strength that could reshape reality, and authority even mighty angels acknowledged. He would bridge heaven and earth, understanding both realms perfectly. Enoch watched as this judge reviewed human history's records, examining every thought, word, and deed with perfect knowledge. The heavenly library's books were opened, revealing every choice's true moral weight. Kings who oppressed the righteous were summoned, their earthly power revealed as temporary illusion. Wealthy oppressors found their treasures transformed into judgment instruments against them. The third parable revealed final judgment's cosmic scope. All created beings, angels, and humans, living and dead, would appear before ultimate justice's throne to receive eternal destinies. Enoch saw the dead's resurrection, multitudes beyond counting rising from graves. Some emerged clothed in light, faces shining with anticipated joy. Others appeared in darkness, expressions reflecting terror of those knowing their choices had separated them eternally from divine blessing. Perhaps the most vivid vision was the animal apocalypse, a symbolic retelling of human history from creation to final judgment, with different animals representing various peoples, nations, and spiritual forces. This was sophisticated prophetic literature, using familiar imagery to convey cosmic truths. Each animal was carefully chosen to represent specific characteristics of the groups it symbolized. The vision began with Adam as a white bull, pure and magnificent in his original state. Eve appeared as a white cow, together representing humanity in its unfallen condition. Corruption began immediately. Cain appeared as a black bull, his dark color representing murder that stained his nature. Abel was shown as a red bull, symbolizing innocent blood crying for justice. The Watcher's descent appeared as stars falling from heaven, brilliant lights abandoning their cosmic positions. Unions between fallen stars and white cows produced enormous elephants, whales, and massive beasts representing the Nephilim. These giant animals immediately devoured all other creatures, consuming everything as the actual Nephilim had devastated the antediluvian world. The flood vision was particularly vivid. Waters rose, covering all land, drowning every creature except those preserved in a great vessel. Noah appeared as a white bull warned by divine messengers to build the ark. After the flood, the vision traced civilization's development. Abraham appeared as a white bull called from among idolatrous people. The Israelites were represented as sheep, vulnerable creatures requiring divine protection in a predator-filled world. Moses appeared as a ram leading sheep out of bondage. The wilderness wanderings were depicted as sheep being led through dangerous territory, protected by divine shepherds. The most dramatic portion concerned history's final period, when great judgment would separate faithful sheep from those who had become corrupted. A figure described as a white bull, clearly, the Messiah, would appear to execute this final separation. Enoch's visions culminated with the ultimate throne room scene, where cosmic justice would finally be administered with perfect knowledge and absolute authority. This was reality's center, the place from which divine authority emanated to govern all creation. The throne was crafted from materials beyond physical reality, radiating light, both beautiful and terrible. Upon this throne sat the Ancient of Days, a figure whose appearance encompassed all concepts of divine majesty. His clothing was white as snow, representing absolute purity. His hair was like pure wool, symbolizing eternal wisdom. His eyes were like flames of fire, indicating knowledge that penetrated all deception. Around the throne stood thousands of angelic beings in perfect order according to their cosmic hierarchy ranks. This was not merely worship, but a courtroom where ultimate justice would be administered. Books were opened, the same divine records Enoch had witnessed, containing perfect accounts of every deed performed by every created being. The fallen watchers were brought before this tribunal in chains, their rebellion and consequences fully exposed. Azazel faced charges for every act of violence committed with weapons he had revealed. Human rulers who oppressed the righteous were summoned to face divine justice. Kings who claimed divine authority discovered their earthly power meant nothing before creation's true sovereign. The dead's resurrection was revealed as the moment when perfect justice would finally be possible. Bodies would be restored in forms appropriate to their eternal destinies, incorruptible for the righteous, shameful for those who had chosen rebellion. Enoch witnessed new heavens and new earth creation, realms where the Watcher's corruption would be impossible, where righteousness would reign without challenge. The Ancient of Days pronounced final sentences with authority no created being could question. The fallen angels received eternal punishment appropriate to their cosmic treason. Unrepentant humans were separated forever from divine presence. But for the righteous, judgment brought vindication and reward beyond imagination. They were transformed into beings capable of eternal fellowship with divine glory, granted access to cosmic knowledge hidden from earthly existence. The vision concluded with cosmic order's complete restoration. The rebellion that began with the Watcher's descent was finally resolved. Evil was contained and punished, righteousness rewarded and established, and cosmic hierarchy restored according to divine intention. For the first 3 centuries, the Book of Enoch held a place of honor among sacred texts. It was quoted by scholars, referenced by church fathers, and treasured by believers seeking to understand the cosmic drama underlying human history. The evidence is overwhelming. Jewish communities during the Second Temple period regarded it as genuine revelation. Multiple copies were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, proving the Essenes considered it worthy of preservation alongside books that would form the Hebrew Bible. Early Christian writers embraced Enoch enthusiastically. The Apostolic Fathers quoted from it freely. Clement of Alexandria called Enoch a prophet and cited his visions as authentic divine revelation. Tertullian defended Enoch's authenticity with legal precision, since Jude, writing under divine inspiration, had quoted Enoch by name in the New Testament. The book must be considered genuine scripture. Most significantly, the Book of Jude contains a direct quotation from Enoch. Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied, saying, "See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone." This is verbatim quote, treated as authentic prophecy. The book's influence extended beyond scholarly circles. Early Christian art depicted scenes from Enoch's visions. Church liturgies incorporated Enochian themes. Believers found explanations for evil's origin and hope for divine justice. For 3 centuries, Enoch was mainstream Christian literature, as accepted as the Gospels themselves. By the 4th century, the Christian church was transforming. What had been a persecuted minority was becoming the Roman Empire's official religion. This brought new concerns about unity, orthodoxy, and institutional control. Establishing biblical canon became political as well as theological. Church leaders were shaping an imperial religion needing clear boundaries and uniform doctrine. Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria emerged as pivotal. In 367 CE, he issued his Festal Letter, listing 27 books as the only legitimate New Testament scriptures. Enoch was conspicuously absent. Athanasius actively argued against Enoch. The church needed scriptures supporting episcopal authority and discouraging individual mystical experiences. Enoch's vivid descriptions of cosmic journeys seemed to encourage personal revelation that threatened institutional control. Other councils followed Athanasius's lead. The Council of Laodicea in 363 CE condemned reading non-canonical books in churches. The councils of Hippo and Carthage solidified these restrictions. Augustine and Jerome added their opposition. Augustine worried Enoch's ancient claims couldn't be verified. Jerome questioned whether such fantastic visions should be taken literally, but deeper anxieties lay beneath theological concerns. The suppression of Enoch wasn't merely about textual authenticity. Church leaders feared specific theological implications that threatened emerging Orthodox doctrine. First, Enoch's detailed angelology was problematic. The book described complex hierarchies of angelic beings, cosmic rebellions, and ongoing spiritual warfare in ways that seemed to grant angels too much autonomy. Church leaders preferred simpler models, where angels were merely divine messengers without independent agency. Second, Enoch's mystical elements encouraged dangerous practices. If Enoch could journey through heavens and receive direct revelation, what prevented others from claiming similar experiences? The book seemed to validate personal mysticism over institutional authority. Third, Enoch's cosmic dualism was concerning. Its vivid descriptions of good versus evil, light versus darkness, suggested a universe where divine authority was genuinely contested. Church leaders preferred emphasizing God's absolute sovereignty over cosmic struggle narratives. Fourth, Enoch's deterministic elements troubled free will theology. Its detailed prophecies and predetermined judgments seemed to limit human agency in ways that contradicted emerging doctrines about salvation and personal responsibility. Fifth, the book's popularity among heretical groups was damaging. Gnostic sects frequently quoted Enoch to support their claims about secret knowledge and cosmic mysteries. Association with these condemned movements made Enoch guilty by association. Finally, Enoch's Jewish origins were problematic in an increasingly Gentile church. As Christianity distanced itself from Jewish roots, texts like Enoch, which were deeply embedded in Jewish mystical tradition, became liabilities rather than assets. The suppression wasn't theological accident, but calculated decision to eliminate a text that empowered individual believers at institutional expense. While European and Middle Eastern Christianity systematically erased Enoch from their libraries, one corner of the Christian world preserved it faithfully. In the highlands of Ethiopia, where Christianity had taken root in the 4th century through the conversion of King Ezana, the Book of Enoch found sanctuary. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church never accepted the Roman Church's canonical restrictions. Several factors contributed to this preservation. Geographic isolation protected Ethiopian Christianity from external pressure. The Church developed independently, maintaining traditions that Western Christianity abandoned. Ethiopian Christianity also preserved stronger connections to Jewish roots. The Ethiopian Church maintained Saturday Sabbath observance, dietary restrictions, and other practices abandoned elsewhere. In this context, Jewish texts like Enoch felt natural rather than foreign. The Ethiopian Church's unique history also played a role. According to tradition, the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon, and their son founded the Ethiopian dynasty. This legendary connection to biblical history made ancient texts seem more legitimate. Most importantly, the Ethiopian Church never experienced the same institutional pressures that drove European suppression. Without Roman imperial demands for uniformity, Ethiopian Christians could maintain diverse textual traditions. Ethiopian monks copied Enoch by hand, Generation after generation, they preserved not just the text, but commentary traditions, liturgical uses, and artistic depictions. Enoch became integral to Ethiopian Christian culture in ways it never achieved elsewhere. When James Bruce encountered those 3 manuscripts in 1773, he was witnessing the culmination of 14 centuries of faithful preservation. Ethiopian Christians had maintained this ancient text through Islamic conquests, internal conflicts, and external pressures. The Ethiopian exception proves that Enoch's suppression wasn't inevitable. In different circumstances, with different priorities, the book might have remained central to Christian thought worldwide. Instead, Ethiopia became the ark that preserved this ancient wisdom through the long night of suppression, waiting for the day when the world would be ready to hear Enoch's voice again. When James Bruce returned to Europe in 1773 with his Ethiopian manuscripts, he had no idea he was carrying one of history's most significant literary discoveries. The 3 copies of Enoch he had obtained would break a silence that had lasted over a millennium. But the path from discovery to understanding was neither quick nor simple. Bruce's manuscripts were written in Ge'ez, an ancient Ethiopian language known to virtually no European scholars. The texts sat in libraries, tantalizingly close yet completely inaccessible to Western scholarship. For nearly 50 years, these precious documents remained locked away, their secrets hidden behind an impenetrable linguistic barrier. Scholars knew they possessed something ancient and potentially important, but without the ability to read Ge'ez, the manuscripts might as well have been written in hieroglyphs. The breakthrough came in 1821 when Professor Richard Lawrence of Oxford accomplished what seemed impossible through painstaking analysis and comparison with other ancient texts. Lawrence produced the first complete English translation of the Book of Enoch. The impact was immediate and profound. Suddenly, after more than a millennium of silence, these ancient words began to speak again to the Western world. Scholars who had known Enoch only through brief quotations in the New Testament now had access to the complete text with all its cosmic visions, angelic hierarchies, and apocalyptic prophecies. The translation revealed a work of staggering scope and imagination. Here was a text that claimed to explain the origins of evil, the nature of divine justice, and the ultimate destiny of creation. It filled gaps in biblical narrative that had puzzled scholars for centuries, providing detailed accounts of events only hinted at in Genesis. But Lawrence's translation was just the beginning. As news of the discovery spread throughout European academic circles, demand grew for better manuscripts and more accurate translations. Scholars began to realize that Bruce's copies might not be the only surviving versions of this ancient text. Throughout the 19th century, explorers and archaeologists made additional discoveries. More Ethiopian manuscripts were found, revealing textual variants that helped scholars refine their understanding of the original text. Each new discovery added pieces to the puzzle, gradually reconstructing a work that had been lost to Western civilization for over 1,000 years. The most dramatic confirmation came in the mid-20th century with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among the thousands of fragments found in the caves near Qumran were portions of the Book of Enoch written in Aramaic, the language in which it was originally composed. These ancient fragments, dating to the centuries before Christ, proved conclusively that the Ethiopian manuscripts preserved an authentic ancient text. The Book of Enoch was not a medieval fabrication, as some skeptics had claimed, but a genuinely ancient work that had been treasured by Jewish communities in the time of Jesus. The Dead Sea discoveries revolutionized scholarly understanding of early Judaism and Christianity. They revealed that the Book of Enoch had been widely read and respected in the centuries surrounding Christ's birth, helping to explain why early Christian writers had quoted it so freely. As translations improved and became more widely available, Enoch began to influence modern thought in unexpected ways. Writers and artists found inspiration in its vivid imagery and cosmic scope. The fallen angels, the giants, the cosmic journeys, all became part of popular imagination. John Milton drew heavily on Enochian themes in Paradise Lost, using the book's detailed descriptions of angelic rebellion to craft his epic poem about the fall of Satan. The Romantic poets found in Enoch a source of sublime imagery that spoke to their fascination with the supernatural and mysterious. In the 20th century, Enoch's influence expanded even further. J.R.R. Tolkien, a scholar of ancient languages, incorporated Enochian elements into his fantasy epics. The concept of fallen angels corrupting the world, of ancient knowledge preserved in hidden texts, of cosmic battles between good and evil, all found expression in Middle-earth. H.P. Lovecraft drew inspiration from Enoch's cosmic horror, the idea that humanity exists in a universe populated by powerful beings whose true nature would drive mortals to madness. The Watchers became prototypes for Lovecraft's Old Ones, ancient entities whose return would bring apocalyptic transformation. Hollywood discovered Enoch as well. Films about angels and demons, about ancient conspiracies and hidden knowledge, about giants and supernatural powers, all drew consciously or unconsciously from themes first articulated in this ancient text. Video games embraced Enochian imagery with particular enthusiasm. The idea of angels falling from grace, of forbidden knowledge, corrupting civilization, of cosmic battles fought across multiple dimensions, provided rich material for interactive entertainment. But perhaps most significantly, Enoch found new life in contemporary spiritual movements. New Age practitioners saw in its cosmic visions confirmation of their beliefs about multiple dimensions and angelic hierarchies. UFO enthusiasts interpreted the Watchers' descent as evidence of ancient alien visitation. Conspiracy theorists found in Enoch validation for their suspicions about hidden powers manipulating human history. The idea that secret knowledge had been suppressed by religious authorities, that fallen angels continued to influence world events, that giants might still walk among us, all resonated with those who questioned official narratives. Even mainstream Christianity began to reconsider Enoch's significance. While most denominations still rejected it as canonical scripture, many acknowledged its historical importance and its influence on biblical writers. Seminary courses began including Enoch in studies of Second Temple Judaism and early Christian literature. The book they tried to erase had returned, not as dusty academic curiosity, but as living influence on contemporary culture. After 16 centuries of suppression, Enoch spoke once more to a world hungry for cosmic meaning and transcendent purpose. As we reach the end of our journey through the Book of Enoch, we're left with questions that challenge everything we thought we knew about human history, about the nature of reality, and about our place in the cosmic order. Consider the scientific parallels that make modern readers pause. Enoch's descriptions of genetic manipulation, of beings from the heavens altering human development, of hybrid offspring with supernatural capabilities, all seem to anticipate concepts that would not emerge in human thought for thousands of years. The book speaks of the Watchers teaching humans advanced metallurgy, astronomical knowledge, and chemical processes that transformed civilization overnight. These weren't gradual discoveries, but sudden leaps in human capability that archaeological evidence suggests did occur in our distant past. Recent genetic research has revealed that modern humans carry DNA from unknown sources, genetic markers that don't match any known evolutionary pathway. Could these be traces of the hybrid bloodlines that Enoch claimed contaminated the human gene pool? The archaeological anomalies we've discussed, the megalithic structures that seem to require capabilities beyond ancient human technology, the giant skeletal remains that consistently disappear from public view, the worldwide flood evidence that supports a global catastrophe, all point to a history far more complex than conventional science acknowledges. But perhaps most compelling is the cross-cultural confirmation. Every civilization on Earth preserves stories of sky gods who descended to mate with human women, of giant offspring who terrorized ancient populations, of a great flood that reset human civilization, of ongoing conflict between spiritual forces of good and evil. These aren't isolated myths, but consistent memories preserved across cultures that had no contact with each other for millennia. The details vary, but the essential narrative remains remarkably consistent, as if all human cultures are preserving fragments of the same cosmic drama. The pattern recognition becomes unavoidable when we examine these stories systematically. The Greek Titans, the Norse Jotnar, the Hindu Dyaus, the Mesopotamian Anunnaki, the Native American cannibalistic giants, all describe beings who challenged divine authority, corrupted human civilization, and were eventually defeated through divine intervention. Why do these stories persist across all human cultures? Why do they follow such similar patterns? Why do they all locate their origins in humanity's distant past? In a time when the boundaries between heaven and earth were more permeable? The conventional explanation that these are psychological projections or symbolic representations of natural phenomena becomes increasingly inadequate when we examine the specificity and consistency of the accounts. But if we take these stories seriously, if we consider the possibility that they preserve actual historical memories, then the Book of Enoch emerges not as ancient fantasy, but as humanity's most detailed record of events that shaped our species in ways we're only beginning to understand. This raises profound questions about the nature of human consciousness, about our relationship to higher intelligences, about the reality of spiritual warfare that continues to this day. If the Watchers' rebellion actually occurred, if their hybrid offspring really walked the earth, if their spirits continue to influence human affairs, then every assumption about reality needs to be reconsidered. The Book of Enoch doesn't provide easy answers, but it asks the right questions. It forces us to look beyond the comfortable boundaries of conventional thinking, to consider possibilities that challenge our materialistic worldview, to acknowledge that the universe may be far stranger and more wonderful than we've been taught to believe. In the end, perhaps that's why religious authorities were so desperate to suppress this ancient text. Not because it was false, but because it was true in ways that threatened their control over human understanding. The book they tried to erase has returned, and with it, questions that may finally be ready to receive honest answers. What if Enoch was right? What if the cosmic drama he described, the rebellion of the Watchers, the corruption of human civilization, the ongoing spiritual warfare between forces of light and darkness, what if all of this actually happened? The implications would be staggering. It would mean that human history as we've been taught it is incomplete, that our origins are far more complex and mysterious than conventional science acknowledges, that we exist in a universe where spiritual forces actively contend for the destiny of our species. It would mean that the violence and corruption we see around us, the seemingly inexplicable human capacity for both transcendent goodness and unspeakable evil, the persistent sense that we're caught in a cosmic struggle beyond our understanding, all of this would make perfect sense. If Enoch was right, then we are not alone in the universe, but neither are we protected from influences that seek our destruction. We are participants in a drama that began before human civilization, that continues in dimensions we can barely perceive, and that will culminate in a final resolution where justice will triumph over rebellion. It would mean that the megalithic structures that dot our planet, the genetic anomalies that science cannot explain, the global flood evidence that supports a worldwide catastrophe, all of these are not mysteries, but memories, physical evidence of events that Enoch recorded with startling accuracy, most profoundly. It would mean that human consciousness itself is a battleground, that our thoughts, our choices, our very souls are contested territory in a war between cosmic forces of order and chaos. The story of the Book of Enoch is ultimately a story about the indestructible nature of truth and the eternal human hunger for cosmic meaning. It reminds us that the questions that mattered to our ancestors still matter today. Who are we? Why are we here? What forces shape our destiny? What lies beyond the veil of physical reality? These are not merely academic inquiries, but existential necessities, questions that every human soul must eventually confront. The Book of Enoch offers answers that are both terrifying and comforting. Terrifying because they reveal the reality of cosmic evil and ongoing spiritual warfare. Comforting because they promise that this struggle has meaning, that justice will ultimately prevail, and that even in the darkest moments, we are not abandoned by the forces of light. Whether we accept Enoch's visions as literal truth, symbolic wisdom, or ancient mythology, we cannot deny their power to illuminate the deepest mysteries of human existence. The book they tried to erase has returned, carrying with it truths that may be more relevant today than ever before. In an age when technology advances at breathtaking speed, when genetic manipulation becomes routine, when the boundaries between natural and artificial blur, Enoch's warnings about the dangers of forbidden knowledge resonate with prophetic urgency. Perhaps that is why this ancient text speaks so powerfully to our contemporary moment. We live in an age that would have been recognizable to Enoch, a time when the line between heaven and earth grows thin, when knowledge advances faster than wisdom, when humanity stands once again at the threshold of cosmic transformation. The questions Enoch raised millennia ago remain as urgent today as they were in his time. And perhaps, finally, we are ready to hear the answers. The truth has a way of surviving, and Enoch's truth, suppressed for 16 centuries, has returned to speak to a world that desperately needs to remember what it means to walk with God. Drop a comment if you believed in any of this or not. Stay tuned in for the next one.